Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We looked previously at the states of the grandfather, and it's probably appropriate to have a look at the states of the grandmother at the same time, as she's connected to that video. So if we consider the states of grandmother, as with the grandfather, we have to first understand what grandmother means. In inheritance, there are actually two types of grandmothers. There's the grandmother, before I go on to that, is in Arabic is Jadda, and there's two types of grandmother. So two types. The first is called Jadda Sahiha. So this can roughly translate as the true grandmother. And the second type is, as you may have guessed, is the Jadda Fasida. And this is roughly translated as a false grandmother. And again, these are technical terms. It's just a way of explaining that some grandmothers are from the Zawil Furud. So the true grandmother is from the Zawil Furud, whereas the false grandmother is from the Zawil Arham, and they only receive if there are no Zawil Furud or Asabat, and that's when they have some share. So if we look at what a true grandmother is and what a false grandmother is, then we can then consider the states. So previously we looked at the grandfather, and we saw that there were actually two types of grandfather as well, the Jad Sahih and the Jad Fasid. So if we draw out that again to consider it, we have father's side of the family, father, mother, father, mother. If we do one more level, and then we have mother's side of the family, and mother, and father, and the grandparents, up to 3 levels. So we've got the parents, mother, and the father on this side, father, and then we've got grandparents, great-grandparents, and great-great-grandparents, and similarly on this side of the family. So we looked at the grandfather and the true and false grandfathers, and we found out that the true grandfather is any grandfather who does not have a female link to the deceased. So we found out that this grandfather was a true grandfather, as was this one and this one, because if we go down the line to X, there's no female link, and we also found out that the rest of the grandfathers must be false grandfathers, because they go through a male link. So look at this one, goes through this grandmother, same as this one, and this one actually goes through 2 female links, so he's also fasid, as is this one, and then straight away you can tell that all of these grandfathers are going to be fasid because they all go eventually reach through the mother. So these are all fasid Jad Fasids. So the only Jad Sahis go through the father's ascendants, and it's straightforward. As for the Jadda Sahiha and Jadda Fasila, it's a bit more involved. What we need to do is define it. So we can actually say that the Jad Sahih, the Jadda, the Jadda Sahiha is any um, grandmother who doesn't pass through a Jad Fasid. So this is the rule. This is the rule. So if we have a look at that rule in a bit more detail, what does it actually mean? So Jadda Sahiha, i.e. the true grandmother, is the one who doesn't pass through any Jad Fasids. So let's look at each of the grandmothers in turn and see which ones fit that bill. We look at this one first. Use a different color. We look at this one first. We can see that this grandmother, the only link through to the deceased is through the father, and so the father isn't a Jad Fasid, he isn't a false grandfather, and so she is a Jad Sahih. Then if we carry on up this line, you will see straight away that all of these will also be Jad Sahis, because there's no Jad Fasids coming in between them and the deceased. Between them and the deceased, there's no Jad Fasids. If we go on to this side, consider this one, you'll notice that this will be a Jad Sahih also, Jadda Sahiyya also, because this grandmother goes through this grandfather and the father. The father isn't considered, and the grandfather here is a, as we just mentioned, is a Jad Sahih, not a Jad Fasid. And remember, the rule is it has to be a Jad Fasid if it's going to be a Jadda Fasida. So because it's a Jad Sahih, then this is a Jadda Sahiha as well, as will be this one. But then the other two on this side, if we look at this one, she's also Jad Sahih, because again only Jad, she goes through only Jad Sahis, not any Jad Fasids. However, if we look at this one, you can see that she is a Jadda Fasida, because she goes through this grandfather here, and he is a Jad Fasid because he goes through his grandmother. So you have to remember that this grandmother is going to be a Jad Fasid, whereas all the other grandmothers on this side are all Jad Sahis. If we turn over to the mother side, all of these grandmothers are going to be Jad Sahis because they don't pass through a Jad Fasid. However, the remaining grandmothers on this side, this one, this one, this one, and this one, will all be Jadda Fasidas because they all pass through a Jad Fasid. And you can see all of these Jads on this side are Jad Fasid, and these four grandmothers are all passing through them, so they are all Jadda Fasidat. So the rule to remember is a Jadda Sahiha is any grandmother who does not pass through a Jad Fasid. So you have to work out the Jad Fasids first, and then check to see if the grandmother passes through one of them on her way to the deceased, and if she does, then she's a Jadda Fasida, and if she doesn't, then she's Sahih. Okay, so now we know which one's a Jad Sahih and which one's a Jad Fasid. Final thing is to state what she actually gets. So if we look at her states, she actually has two states. Either first is she gets a sixth. This is share, and this is a condition. The share is a sixth, and this is when there's one or more Jad Sahihas, one or more, and they share a sixth, and we'll come back to that in a moment. And the other option, two, is she gets 0, she gets nothing, and there's 3 times this happens. One is where mother is alive. So if the mother is alive, you go back to the tree. If the mother of the deceased is alive, then all of the grandmothers are deprived of any share at all. So provided the mother is alive, the grandmother will never receive anything, irrespective of which side of the family the grandmother comes from, be that the father's side or the mother's side. So that's number one, or A. B is relates to the father's mother. Father's mother, father's side grandmothers are disinherited. Disinherited when father is alive. So if we look at the father, so assuming that the mother has passed away, so let's say X's mother has passed away, however the father is still alive, what the father will do is he will actually deprive all the grandmothers, on this side of the tree. He will deprive all his mother and his great grandmother, except his grandmother, and so on and so forth. However, he won't deprive the mother's side grandmothers. So the father, whereas the mother deprives all grandmothers, the father only deprives his side of the family tree. And then the final condition is the grandfather. When grandfather is alive, then those grandmothers. So grandfather is alive, then the father's side is deprived. So similar to how the father deprives grandmothers, so does the grandfather. So this grandfather here will deprive the other grandmothers over there on the father's side of the family, and he won't deprive this side of the family. So just to recap, the grandmothers get a sixth if there's one or more of them. However, they're deprived. All grandmothers are deprived if the mother is alive. The father's side grandmothers are deprived if the father is alive, and again the father's side grandmothers are deprived when the grandfather is alive. And if there's one, the final thing to note is the closer grandmothers receive before the further away ones. So let's just draw out the family tree again. It's getting a bit messy. We have X, mother, father, mother, father. And let's say that we know that if mother is alive, this is mother and this is father, we know that if mother's alive, she will deprive all of the grandmothers, irrespective of which side. So let's say she's passed away, and we know that father, if he's alive, he'll deprive this side of the family tree. So let's say he's passed away, as has grandfather. Um, let's say that this grandmother and this grandmother are both alive. Then we know that they get a sixth, so they share a sixth. So they get 12 each, 12th and 12th. The other option is, let's say these two are alive, but then also one from a higher level is alive, so the deceased great grandmother. So we have two grandmothers of the deceased, and we have a great grandmother of the deceased. So what happens is that the great grandmother is prevented from receiving anything due to the lower grandmothers. So we can draw a line there, and no one above this line will receive. So only the grandmothers will get anything, and this carries on up the chain. So if the great grandmother's alive and great great grandmother's alive, an unusual situation, but it could happen, then the great grandmothers would prevent the great great grandmothers from receiving anything. So, as recap, main things to remember are there are two types of grandmother: the Jadda Sahiha and the Jadda Fasida. The Jadda Sahiha is the true grandmother, the Jadda Fasida is false grandmother. You work out which one is which by remembering the rule, and the rule is a Jadda Sahiha is any grandmother who doesn't pass through a Jadd Fasid. Once you've worked out who are the Jadda Sahihas, you just need to remember the rule as to what they receive. Essentially, they get a sixth, and they share a sixth if there's more than one. And the only reason they will not get a sixth is if the mother is alive, in which case all grandmothers are disinherited, or if the father is alive, then he will disinherit the father's side, and similarly the grandfather will do the same. And then the last point is that closer grandmothers deprive further away grandmothers from receiving the share.